Well, welcome to the latest episode of There's That. We are two chicks with questions ready to tackle a conversation that disrupts our leadership in the very best way. My name is Gina McLean, and I'm here with my co-host, Cindy Fiala. Cindy, how are you today?
Hey, good morning. It's morning here. I'm great. How is everybody else?
Doing good.
Doing good? Great.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Well,
we're going to tackle, you go. You intro. That's yours, girl.
Yeah, we're going to tackle a topic that, honestly, I'm going to say that I wasn't exactly exposed to it. I mean, I know it's always been around, but I didn't realize the depth of it until I became really good friends with my friend, Ashley Beaumont. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, friends.
And so today we're going to talk about leading in ministry out of your singleness.
Mm-hmm.
Not leading, and I'm single, but leading out of your singleness. And this is a good thing. So we're just going to throw this grenade into the middle of the room. We've got two friends with us, Ashley Beaumont. Hey, Ash.
Hey.
Kellen Moore.
Hello.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. I know it's weird being on a screen. Gina and I keep talking about, man, we can't wait to have these conversations in person.
In person, please.
Yeah. So
Agreed.
Hey, can we just acknowledge for just a minute here? Kellen, you're still in the closet.
Oh, Gina. Oh,
that's not
Gina.
Today's topic. But I just thought we should acknowledge that you're in a closet.
I'm in a closet because I'm in my first apartment, and it's small, and they're building a giant building across the street. So there are cars and beeping and construction noises, and it's the only quiet place in my house. So I decked it out with a beautiful bag.
Beautiful.
There you go.
Good art.
It's perfect. Good art, yeah.
You could say you're on vacation because it looks a little bit like a vacation.
I'm on
vacation.
This is my Zoom background. That pops up.
That is perfect.
That's awesome. Well, gosh, we'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves. Tell everybody about you, what you do, where you're at, and anything fun you'd like to add. Ashley, why don't you go first?
All right. Well, my name is Ashley Beaumont. I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I work for a company called Orange. I'm the director of middle school strategy there. I'm also the executive director of an organization in Ethiopia called Carry 117. Love just ministry in general. Started my professional career as an educator, volunteering in the church, and then transitioned, and a coach. And then transitioned to full-time ministry inside the church rather than out. I've been, working in ministry working with teenagers for over 16 years. And I'm so excited to be on this vlogcast. What are we calling this?
I think we call it a vodcast. I don't really know.
Vodcast.
I don't know.
Let's go with that. It sounds good.
All right.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Like it.
Yeah.
So honored to be here, excited especially with you three. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Anytime Kellen is involved, it will be fun.
Always.
That's
Kellen,
true.
tell us about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Kellen Moore. It's the best name ever because it's mine. And I'm currently the next generation pastor at a church in Corona, California called Our City Church. Next gen pastor is just a fun word of saying I work with kids through young adults. I get that whole gambit. We're a church plant. We're almost 2 years old. So we still meet. Well, we did meet up to this point in a school, but now we're all digital. Yeah. But I have about 12 years of ministry full-time in my life. And I've worked everywhere from middle school to kids ministry, to high school, to middle school, to all of them, to young adults, to all that stuff. And I also get to work with the same organization Ashley works with Orange, where I do podcasts and preteen videos and hosting and all that stuff. So I get to travel a lot.
He's kind of famous.
Yeah.
Totally famous.
I mean, he's like the most miserable person to walk through any event with because he gets pulled in every direction for pictures. And it's kind of like, okay, Kellen, we'll just talk later. Bye.
Yes, church people like to recognize people they see on the screen. So yes, a lot of people use the curriculum, the so-and-so show, and so they like to get pictures and videos.
Yeah.
But what
Almost-
most people may not know about you, Kellen, and Ashley as well, is you're both single.
Yes.
And in ministry. And
Well, Kellen's only single for a week longer.
yeah, he didn't have much longer, was he?
Yes. So
That's about to change.
yeah. So the last 10, what am I, almost 33? So yeah, so the last 12 years I was single in ministry, and I'm getting married next week at the time of us recording this.
Yeah.
And so I will no longer be single, but I have years of experience of leading as a single person in ministry. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'd love to just start it out by maybe asking the question, what's been the most surprising thing to you that you never expected being in ministry and being single?
Ooh, good question. Well, can I just first start off by saying, this is a weird topic to talk about. I just want to acknowledge it because I want to acknowledge it because, to be honest, like, I'm not trying to build a platform as like a single ministry leader person. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I also want to talk about it because I feel like I'm learning a lot about it. And I've observed a lot of different things and learned a lot about myself and my own beliefs that are like ingrained in me without even knowing it. And I have a passion for seeing the church do a better job of integrating singles in ministry and in the church, and how culture's changed and like how the church needs to change in response. But I do want to say, like, it's easy, like, to go on a podcast and about this kind of a topic and people kind of tune it out, or they make assumptions about the people who are on as a guest, like what they want or don't want, why they may be single, why they're not single, like that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so anyways, if you're watching and listening, I just want to encourage you to keep listening. I feel like this conversation is for everybody. This isn't just for single people.
Yeah,
100%.
That's good.
I agree.
What do you think, Ashley? I'd love to hear your perspective on this. What do you think most people think when they encounter a ministry leader who is single? What do you think is going through their mind? What are the assumptions that they make?
Well, I can only speak from my experience and as a female in ministry. So I'm curious also to hear what Kellen says about this.
Yeah,
I got some
as
thoughts.
A male. Yeah. I was going to say, initially, I would say people think you're weird. Really? Like something's wrong with you or weird with you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I am a strange person.
I would say outside of us being weird, outside of the
truth of that. I think it's like, there must be something like wrong with them that they're single. Or I've experienced kind of being treated as a liability being single in ministry. And I would also say in ministry, oftentimes I'm kind of like a goofy personality in general, and that's something I hope to never lose. But I've often been treated like I'm much younger than I actually am because I'm not married or I don't have children. So it's almost like you're not taken as seriously, or you must not be as mature in life because you haven't arrived yet.
Yeah, I was going to say that was actually the first thing I was going to say is you're looked at, because I started middle school ministry, and so going into middle school ministry, single dude right out of college, and the college I went to was in the Bible Belt of Texas, so everyone there was either getting married their senior year and then going to ministry, or getting married within the first year of meeting someone, their first year of their full-time job. But yeah, the seriousness, if I didn't move back to my hometown and work at my home church, I don't think I would have been taken as seriously out the gate. I think there would have been you're just a silly youth pastor. It's all good. And when you settle down, when you get a woman by your side, then you're going to really excel in ministry. And so I think the first thing, my initial thought is, this Kellen getting a job as a single man is his first step of becoming this wonderful senior pastor someday. And his next step is finding a wife, and then doing young adult ministry, and then leading a church. And I'm like, I just want to work with kids because I think they're awesome. And I'm choosing to be single right now because it's super fun being able to, figure life out on my terms.
I think that's a good point, Kellen. It made me think of some other things. It's like there's an assumption that everybody wants to be married, or that if you're not married yet, especially as you get into your 30s, that you're angry about it. And so I would say there's a lot of assumptions around that. And then Kellen, I have seen oftentimes where, when you're a male in single ministry, oftentimes like parents sometimes see you as a predator. Whereas if you're a female in ministry, it's like other adults in ministry see you as a predator in a way, like after their marriage.
Yeah, you're not allowed to drive in any car with any adult, and I'm not allowed to drive in a car with any student, which is I understand the precedence. I understand the bottom line of that. But as a single person, if you're listening to this and you are married, I want you to really listen to this. If you're working with single people, and if you're single, please listen to what I'm saying. I have worked, and Ashley, you probably did the same thing. I worked kind of double hard to make sure that certain attachments and certain positions that I was in as an adult male wouldn't compromise the ministry. So like if we're doing a hangout and there's mixed both genders there, and there's a female that is waiting for her parents, I will grab any and every person. I'm not staying here. I'm not that youth pastor. I don't need to be the hero of this situation. And so, it is one of those things where you have to be very careful as a male around, especially I worked with middle school. They're all preteens. So, you got to really be aware of what's happening.
There's that.
There's that.
There is that.
I think, but you used a term, Ashley, though, that I find fascinating. You use the term liability.
Yeah, I was going to come back to that too.
Yeah, which is kind of where some of this stuff is hovering around, that you would feel like a liability. Can we dig into that more?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing a podcast one time, and the topic of singleness came up, and the guy that was on, one of the guests on the podcast with me, was in charge of like hiring for churches, or part of hiring for churches. And he made the comment on the podcast. It stuck with me for a long time. Number one, I was like, I will cut you, but I didn't. But
it's good.
He made the comment like, oh, no church wants to hire anyone who's single. That's just a liability. And I kind of understood in a way of what he was saying. He was, because I think there is a hesitancy of like, why are you single? And technically it's against the law to ask that in an interview. Yeah. But like, if I'm trying to get a job at a church, I've never been married, I have no kids, and they're wondering why, because it's in a lot of people's minds, it's weird, which is why I'm excited we're having the conversation, because I think depending on who you're talking to and who they've been exposed to in their life, like what generation are they from as well, depends on how they look at it and how they view it. And so I would say, are we, there's assumptions that everyone wants to get married in the church. And so if they haven't found anyone, are they coming looking for somebody? How do we feel about that? Are they going to be after somebody else's marriage? Like, we don't want any scandals, or,
Wow.
What's fascinating to me, like in that statement, actually, you probably get this all the time as well. And Gina, you probably as well. But like when you get churches that are asking, hey, do you have any amazing kids pastors or youth pastors that we need to hire someone? And isn't it funny how when you're like, well, the people that you probably want, like the high level leaders, they already have a job and they're working at a high level at a church. I know a bunch of young people who need experience that may not be married or check the boxes, but I feel like there's a lot of churches that are unwilling to, one, put the legwork into developing amazing leaders, and two, allowing that leader to be right out of college, be single, be inexperienced, bring people around to, to grow. So I just find that interesting that person was like, oh, we don't want to hire, or we're looking to hire someone married with experience, where normally that type of person is running a ministry somewhere.
That's really good. And I even
Mhm.
want to jump off of that because it sparked another thought, Kellen, that is a little bit of a turn, but a grenade nonetheless. How often do you believe this happens when I'm looking to hire somebody and I have the choice between a prospective hire that is married with a family, and I have or sitting right next to them is equally qualified single person. In my mind, how often do you think this happens when I think, well, I could pay the single person less because they don't have a family to support?
Oh, she threw a big grenade, right?
I really would love, I mean, is that a real thing? Maybe it's not.
Oh no.
Maybe it's not. So can we talk about
Yeah.
that?
Yes,
Because
it
there's
is.
that.
It is a real thing. I've
Yeah.
worked in 4 different churches now, and
Yeah.
one church paid me my worth because I was single. So they paid me down.
Yeah.
If I were to have been married, and even if my spouse had another job, I would have gotten paid more strictly because my marital status. There was one church that I worked at recently where when I walked into it, they're like, no, we're going to pay you this good amount because we think you are worth this in
Mhm.
our ministry. And so that kind of gave me a good perspective. But I'm more than certain that there are plenty of single people out there that aren't getting paid what their leadership is worth. Now, there's not every single person has experience, and
Right.
so they're
Right.
kind of, it's like,
Or
okay,
qualifications. Yeah.
qualifications, exactly. But if you've been in the game for 10 plus years and your track record's amazing, I hope that your pay and benefit will match any other person, regardless of how many kids they have.
Sure.
I know there's exceptions. If you're coming into the game and if your kid has special needs and you need certain medical and all that, I understand pay, accommodate per person. But I think if you're single and you have the time and you have the experience and you have the track record and the resume and all this stuff, I feel, and I don't care if you're a man or woman, I think, and that's a whole other conversation, but
I know.
across the board, you should be paid what you are worth from the church and what the church
And
can
that's
afford.
tricky.
Right.
Yeah, I jump off of that and say, agree, Kellen, with everything you said. I do understand, like, as someone who's hiring someone, you want to be able to, you have to pay them enough to get them to relocate or to be able to take the job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But it is really hard. I don't think it's just for single people. I think it's even people who don't have children. They might be married with no children.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
I feel like, it's expensive to be married and have children, and it's expensive to be single and have to pay for everything by yourself. But I wish we paid people based on their years experience and their contribution and skills, and not paid people because for somebody to be the sole income in their family, if they're married with kids, that's like a, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't feel like we should pay people so that their other spouse can stay home. I agree with, like, the importance of raising a family, but to me that feels like not fair to people who aren't in that situation, especially because usually the single people are the ones covering maternity leave for those who are out or things like that. So
yeah, man, there's another
really
grenade.
I mean, well, before you throw another grenade, I would say also, like, I know my very first church job that I took, and I don't know motivation here. I can only, like, put pieces of information together. So I don't want to, I love everybody I've ever worked for and every church I've ever worked for, but I was, I had 2 degrees in education, had over 6 years experience in the education system, and had been volunteering at this church for a while. And, when again, I'm not trying to talk bad, I'm just being honest. Like, when I started the interview process with them, here was the job description, here was the amount they were going to pay that person. And when I went in, once I accepted the job, when I went in to sign my offer letter, they had dropped the amount of money without saying anything. And so it's not even just being single in ministry, but it's also, you add the fact that I'm a female. It's a whole nother conversation. And I mean, also, I'll say this because this is uncomfortable to talk about, but when we're talking about money, I'm 36 years old. I got my very first professional raise last year, ever in my whole professional career.
Wow.
Like I had gotten cost of living raises,
But a professional
I had
pay
never been
increase.
given a professional pay increase
Yeah.
until last year.
Yeah. I think
It's
that's fascinating. I think, Ashley, if it helps or if it makes you feel any better in this conversation, here's the thing. We know that previous employers, present employers, whatever, there's not ill intent.
Never.
right.
But what we're kind of uncovering is just a natural bias that we can have that we just don't realize is there, you know?
Yep.
I think we said there's no ill intent, but there's no intentional intent either.
Oh man, that's good. Yes, you're right.
Really good.
I think that's what bugs me. And I'll make faces all day when Ashley says stuff like that, because prior to even about to marry someone who's worked in ministry, like we don't have to go down this road. I just have to express it because everyone watching saw my face cringe. I do not understand how male leaders have those biases towards female leaders who are sometimes, like my fiance, more qualified than other people on the staff that may, be a dude. I don't get that. And so we don't have to go down that. I just need to say it out loud because the grenade blew up inside of me.
Yeah, there's another conversation about that, right, Ash?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a huge topic, but it's interesting because there is a bit of a double bind being single and being female. And
I was going to say the natural times that people ask for a raise too are usually like, I'm moving, my husband or wife is staying home, I'm having a child, I'm getting married.
Yeah.
So when a single person who doesn't have children isn't married, when is the right time to ask for a raise?
Right.
And is it justified in the person's eyes?
I feel like that right time is when they start asking you to do more. When they start asking you to do more because, well, you're single.
See that? I'm curious.
I worked at a spot where, and I love this place, and I won't say any names or anything like that, but I love this place. What ended up happening was they had to cut salaries, and so some people had to get let go, which sucked. It was really, really hard. But at the time, I was the middle school pastor. Then I became the middle school and kids pastor and the associate intern director, which I didn't want to do that one. But so I actually, my job tripled and my pay went down.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, mainly because, well, he has time. He doesn't have to go home and be a husband. He doesn't have to go to his kids' stuff and this, that, and the other. When in fact, I was going to multiple families' kids' stuff and I was doing all this stuff. So I think sometimes, I believe when the ask gets higher, the church should also come behind and say, well, we're asking you to do more. So here's a little bit more to compensate the time that we're asking you.
I do want to say though, I'm not trying to, defend in a way, but usually.
No, defend, Ashley. That's why we're here to talk.
I feel like there is a point in ministry, in a season of ministry, where you do have to prove yourself and you have to hustle and you 100%. Have to work way more hours than you're getting paid for in order to prove your worth. Yeah. But that's where I feel like there needs to be, just because it shouldn't be that you're single. It's there's experience or something like that that feels like it should be the marker, not marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
Okay. So I'm gonna take a turn a little bit. So let's talk about the fact that you have time, quote unquote, because you're single. How do you protect your time? How do you set good boundaries? And how do you communicate that to leaders and volunteers in your ministry so that they respect your time as well? You know what I'm saying? So how do you live out of and do ministry out of your singleness in a healthy way?
That's a great question. Do you want me to go?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. One thing that I established for me personally, and maybe this is well before I knew what Enneagram was, so part of me just liked my alone time and not to work, and I'm like, man, I'm just super lazy. But I think what I established right off the bat was whatever day they gave me off, I took that day off. Like, period. Where even if it was Saturday, I would Saturday doesn't count. We always did stuff Saturday. If Friday was our day off, I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't plan events. I wouldn't plan, if students had games and whatnot, I would pick and choose very selectively of what I wanted to do that day. And I think that's just the starting point. Like, I told my lead pastor, I'm like, hey, thank you so much for giving us this day off, but don't expect me. And this was me. I had rapport with my lead pastor because he was my lead pastor since I was in third grade, sixth grade. So like, he knew me, but I made a very distinct point of, this Friday, this is my day off. I don't want to be expected to do anything on my day off unless something like, fall fest. I don't say Halloween. Churches don't celebrate Halloween. If like fall festival fell on my day off, I understood those moments. I understood those things that we do. But for the most part, I told my leaders, I'm like, if you want to go see a movie with me, cool. But we're doing things on my term on my day off. And so that was just like the bottom of the barrel, is I picked a day and that was my day. And I was really good at not checking emails at home. So there's that too.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with my friend, Katie Edwards, who is a middle school pastor in California. And I loved talking with her because she was, talking about, the difference between somebody who's married in ministry and somebody who's single in ministry is we just choose to do different things with our free time. It doesn't mean I have more time. It just means that she chooses to have a husband and children to raise, and I choose to have a ministry I raise.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So
or
good.
I have these hobbies or whatever. And I think that that's like one really tangible action step is,
so good.
Are we treating singles and married the exact same when it comes to boundaries of work? It's just their family is what they choose to do in their free time. And I might choose to do something else, but it doesn't mean it's less important. Yeah. And so I loved having that conversation with her because I felt super validated in it. And I was like, people who are married, who lead single people, I would love to hear you say that, Katie, because I think every single person would feel so validated. And just because, there was one staff that I worked for, and when we were in recruiting season, for new volunteers, we were recruiting for middle school ministry, adult volunteers, and then high school volunteers to also be in those small groups. And we were kind of dividing and conquering, like, who's going to interview who of all these potential volunteers. And so they all kind of divvied it up, and they had asked me, will you interview all the potential high school volunteers? But here's the thing, and I want to be a team player here, but here's the thing. All the high school interviews had to be conducted in the evening. Because the high schoolers were at school, they couldn't meet me for coffee. It had to be done after probably 4 or maybe even 6 p.m. depending if they were an athlete or not, or on the weekend.
Wow, so good.
And so I understand, like, in that moment, I think that's one thing is like, I would love for, if somebody was going to ask me to be flexible with my schedule because I am single, I want them to acknowledge that they're asking me to be flexible because I have that flexibility. It's when they don't acknowledge the flexibility, because I think that's one of the things about boundaries that I really love is that I do have flexibility in my schedule. So if I am a morning person and I wake up at 5 a.m. and I don't have to care for a kid or feed a kid or whatever, I can work at that time, which means I can be flexible with what it looks like, which is part of what I love about being single. Right. I get to choose my flexible work hours. But yeah, I don't know. That was my thought.
I think that's so good though, because
really
a lot of times it isn't just the fact that it isn't the thought that, well, maybe Ashley could be the one to tackle the high school interviews. It's not the thought that's inherently wrong. It's the assumption that you should be okay with it, and that you should just flex that direction. If anything, if the approach was, tell me if I'm off base here, but if the approach was, hey, Ashley, you have more flexibility in your evening time. These interviews with this particular demographic is going to require more evening interviews. Would you be willing to carry that weight?
And here's the thing. Here's the tension that lies in that. Yes, that's a better way to ask it. But I think, yes, I have more flexibility, but again, when you go back to, but what if I just want to go home and lay on the couch and do nothing?
Right.
It's taken me a really long time to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
To be
And the
okay with like,
assumption,
I'll do part of the interviews.
sure.
Is everybody
Yeah.
else going to flex?
Can everybody else flex
Yeah.
as well? Yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
No?
Yeah, I hear you there. I hear you there. I love I love what you
Good.
said just a minute ago in how you were sharing. I think that people do, again, this goes back to the natural biases. I think that people do assume that because you are not married, that is not how you want it to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is not your choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if there's anything, after this conversation, for me, this is my desire. All of us have different desires, in terms of how this conversation affects people or impacts leaders. But for me, that's what I would want. Is I would want a leader to listen to this conversation and to walk away and get rid of that bias.
Yeah.
And quit assuming that the single person on their team chooses or doesn't want to be married, but has no choice. Right.
Yeah.
And on the same note as that, it is true that a lot of people who are single really desperately want to be married, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
Sure.
It's the desire of their heart, and that's great. I think it's like you said, it's the danger in assuming everybody wants that. So a safe first question isn't, so why aren't you married yet? It's, do you want to be married one day? You know what I mean?
Good.
Like,
yes,
do you
that's
want
different.
that? It's a totally different conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good.
I mean, I think it's like you said, there's not ill intent. And that's why talking about this sometimes feels scary, because I can give all these examples of where I see issues, but it can come across as angry or frustrated or like, I hate married people. And that's not at all what I'm trying to say. But, when I'm in my 30s and I go to weddings, like I've been sat at the kids' table. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
Multiple times, multiple weddings.
Yeah.
I'm sat at the kids' table because apparently I can't sit with my married friends. Like at a wedding, it's only married couples who sit together, or like small groups that you try to get in, and a lot of small groups, it's like marrieds only. Well, when you're moving to a new town and they only have singles small groups, or they have married small groups, and all the singles are in the early 20s, I'm in my 30s, and I can't be in a married small group. Even though I wouldn't mind, I love being around my married friends. Like I'm fine being a third wheel. Are they okay with it? I'm fine as long as I don't become their babysitter.
Right.
That's another tension.
Ouch.
Is hang out with single people if they will help watch our kids so we can get stuff done around our house.
No.
The trick is don't like their kids. Let the kids hate you so that they'll never want to.
That's the way to do it.
I can't.
Or just keep having old friends like me who I don't have kids at home anymore.
There you go.
No, you're not old. I just want to note that.
Oh, well, thanks. You just keep telling me that because whatever I am.
Right.
But
I'm really curious right now. What are we not asking?
I'm sitting here just listening and learning because I don't actually know all the right questions to ask.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good question, Gina.
I mean, I guess maybe the root of the conversation really is culture is changing, and the traditional view of family is different now than it used to be, and the traditional view of marriage is different than it used to be, and the traditional percentages of people getting married and the age they're getting married have changed. And so when you're looking at a ministry or a church, and you've got boomers, and you've got Gen Xers, and you've got millennials, and then Gen Z coming up, all working in the church together, right? You're talking about completely different values and views of marriage and family, and none of them are right or wrong. It's just different values. And, every generation is a reaction to, not a reflection of the generation before them. And so when you start to look at research and you see that, like, for the boomer generation, about over 90% of people in the boomer generation got married. When you look at Gen X, it drops to only 82%. Millennial generation is about 70%. That means only 7 out of 10 people are getting married in the millennial generation, rather than 1 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. That's a big difference. And you're talking about the divorce rate is increasing simultaneously. So only about 50% of people over the age of 18 are married at any given time, which means they may be single because they've never been married, or they might be single again because they've been separated or divorced. And there's a million reasons why people are, you know, choosing not to get married, because certain things are more acceptable in culture now, like living together, for example. But also research is saying is people are waiting till later to get married, you know. For the boomers, it was, you know, early 20s, and now for the millennial generation, which would be Kellen and I, it's late 20s. And so it, like, all of those research numbers come with expectations of what somebody wants. You know, I just read a study that was saying like the marriage rate is the lowest it's been in 150 years.
Wow.
And so doesn't that mean as a church, the way we view singleness has to change? The way we view family has to change? The way we view marriage has to change?
Right.
Like, don't we want to be the good news for exactly where somebody is and what they choose in life? And I think when you ask, like, what are we not asking? Like, I get super passionate talking about this. So sorry, I'm just going on and I'm on a soapbox right now.
I love it.
But I want the church to be better. I want the church to not idolize marriage in a way that makes this next generation of kids and teenagers think the only way they've spiritually arrived, or that God could possibly use them, is if they get married or have children. Like, the goal in life is God's kingdom come here on earth, and he's gifted every single person in a different way. And when we avoid, you know, considering singles, I mean, you look at people in the Bible who were some of the most the biggest people when it comes to building the church. They weren't married either. And I'm not trying to say like one is better than the other or one is wrong, although Paul had thoughts about that, right?
I know. I was just gonna say, I mean, like, he has a pretty good argument about if you're not married, don't get married unless you can't control yourself. You know, all those things. I just think that if we could model for this next generation of kids and teenagers that they don't have to get married. Like, you can, it's a choice. Then maybe they're not going to settle or feel like failures when they turn 23 and aren't married yet, and choose to marry the next person who comes along, and 10 years down the road it doesn't work out and they find themselves in a darker place than they were at 23.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, that's good.
And I just feel like we can do and I don't know, I just want to do better. And I want to be part of that, which is why I said yes to this podcast. They fall out of these ears all the time.
We're grateful that you're a part of this conversation, that this is what leaders need to hear. This is
Kellen, I'll give you a chance to talk. Sorry, man.
This is perfect.
Listen, when I see people's eyes start to get watery because they're so passionate, I will sit, listen, and take notes. So there's nothing wrong. I think, Cindy, to answer your question, Ashley gave me a lot of fuel to answer that question of some questions we can ask. I think the first one, if I don't know, I don't hire people. I don't want to be an executive pastor. That sounds not fun at all. So no offense, but all offense. Don't want that job. But in hiring people, I know you're allowed to ask, what are your professional dreams and goals? And I think you should ask that. And then I'm not sure if you're allowed to ask this, but if you can, what are some personal goals, you as a person? Because I think sometimes the church will intertwine those two. Because I want to be a pastor, my calling is not my personal. Do I make it personal? Yes. But it also is my job. And it's what I want to do, not really who I want to become. So you can call me a pastor, you can call me Mr. Kellen, you can call me that tall guy like most kids do. And I have no problem with that, because my identity is not in my title. And so when asking what are some professional things, well, professionally, I want to, start a revolution in young people's lives so they understand who they are and go out to the world and make disciples and let them know who Jesus is. Now, if you ask me personally, all through my 20s, I wanted to be a dad since I was a teenager, because I think kids are, and I wasn't going to be a teenage dad. I just always wanted to have kids because that seems so fun. Even now I want to have kids, but I didn't let that dictate me as a single person. of the decisions I was going to make.
It's good. Yeah.
Because I could have easily found someone in college. Not easily. I didn't have much game in college, but I could have been, going on dates and finding someone in my early 20s to accomplish the goal of being a husband and a dad. And I could have a 10-year-old right now and be like, yeah, life is awesome. But I really followed what God had for me. And it was, hey, I want you to develop you. And I tell Katie this all the time, not Edwards. I should call her, not Edwards, but my fiance. What was I going to say? Dang it, that joke threw me off. Don't cut this. Keep it in. I want people to know my flaws.
Yes.
But I tell this all the time. Like, I prayed for you, and I didn't really wait for you because I was doing stuff in the meantime. I wasn't sitting back saying, woe is me, I'm single and I'm never going to get married. Like, I didn't have that approach, but I just trusted God and knew something was going to happen at some point because he knows my heart. He knows my desires. So I used my 20s to figure out who I was. And I always tell her, if you met me at 21, you would have had the roughest, outwardly fun. But if you got me behind closed doors, I was a mess. I didn't know what I believed. I was a coward in certain areas of defending and standing up for. I didn't know, like, I was a shell of what you see now. Hopefully it's good stuff. But if I didn't go through my 20s and make mistakes and figure things out and just do life, I don't think I would have been well prepared for how amazing she was in supporting her at the level I think she needs someone to support her. And so if you're listening and you're single, man, unless getting married is like your number one goal, and to each their own, work on yourself. Use life to develop yourself. It's okay to be single in ministry. You can do great things. Just because you're not a parent doesn't mean you can't
100%
identify with parents. One of the greatest compliments I ever got was from, I love this. Her name was Jill, and she came up to me in the youth center. She came up and said, Kellen, I appreciate you leading my kids, because when I see you, you think like a parent. And greatest compliment, because our jobs as youth leaders and pastors are to make sure these kids are safe, and we're kind of raising them spiritually in the few hours we get. And so all that to say, now I feel like I'm rambling.
No, it's good.
Not at all.
You're good.
In your 20s, figure out yourself. Don't rush into things. If we keep saying we trust God, give them space to be trusted.
Such a good word.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
So
I think that's so good. I think, just to piggyback off that and maybe say it in a little bit of a different way, life doesn't start when you get married.
Oh, wow.
Ministry doesn't start when you get married. Ministry starts way before that. And if marriage is part of what God has for you or what you want, then awesome. That's part of the journey. But, I think when it comes to, I don't know, I feel like there's a difference between setting your eyes on, this is how God's wired me. This is what I can do for the kingdom, to build the kingdom. And this is what I'm passionate about, setting my eyes on that, versus I want to get married. And once I get married, then I'm going to focus on what God's wired me to do. I think it's a totally different conversation.
Yeah.
And so,
one of the things that you said, Kellen, was, you talked about how you took your 20s and you figured out who you were, and you allowed God to work in you and mature you and grow you. Do you know what? That is what every single one of us should do before we ever consider being in any kind of a relationship. If that's what God has for you, if that's where he's leading you, our goal shouldn't be, I've got to get in this relationship and then work out whatever it is that I'm supposed to do or who I am. That is probably one of the biggest reasons why there are so many troubled marriages and troubled relationships, because people haven't figured themselves out and they're looking for someone else to rescue them or fix them or, all this kind of thing. So that's another podcast.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of weight that comes with that, and people's, mental and this, and I understand counseling and all that stuff comes with it, but because I'm looking at Ashley and I'm like, there's a bunch more we could say on that, and I agree.
Right.
So I'm giving a big general from my perspective, because I only can speak from my perspective.
I would say, to follow up all of that, as we're speaking to single people about, when they're single, setting their eyes on get to know yourself and get to know what God's got in store for you. Mm-hmm. And if marriage is part of the equation, great. If not, you're still okay.
Right.
And you can still be super successful. But I would say to married people listening, be cautious about the words you use when talking about that with somebody who's single. And so what I mean by that is a lot of times when married ministry leaders stand on a stage or talk to a room of people or one-on-one talk about singleness, they use the phrase "in your season of singleness."
Oh, yes.
So can you imagine if me as a single person use the phrase to you that are married in your season of being married?
Yeah. Right.
It's like, wait, what? So by using the phrase "in your season of singleness," I think what we indirectly say is that's not the landing spot.
Right.
And so I feel like I like, Kellen, what you were saying is if you want to be married one day, you need to find out who you are and how you're wired before you can fully give yourself to someone else in a way that's honoring to how God's wired you. And I think that's so true, but I just want us to be careful that we're not indirectly planting these seeds of this can't be the landing spot.
Yeah.
And it's almost condescending too, to say "in your season of singleness."
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it's
good.
Oh, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Or so even the phrase "one day when you get married."
Right. Yeah.
Again, just a little change in the language is "one day if you choose to get married."
Yeah.
You can say the same thing you want to say, but when we change the language, little ears are listening. There's expectations we build in the lives of the next generation by the way we talk about single people around them, the way we value them in our church, and the way we talk directly to them.
Yeah.
And the whole next generation is pretty much single. So
I know,
right. I mean, how much more important it is to pay attention to this, to make sure that we change the way that we are communicating, to address those, to recognize first, but then be intentional. Going back to what Kellen, you had said early on, well, let's recognize the biases that we have, but then let's start intentionally changing them. Yeah. Changing our language, changing the way that we see the expectations that we have, all those things. So, man, this is great.
Wow.
And I think
a good conversation.
One of the bravest things a ministry leader can do is ask somebody who's single, because it's very weird for a single person to bring up to someone, "Hey, let me tell you what it's like to be single in ministry." It's awkward to say something like that.
Yeah.
But it takes a really brave ministry leader to ask a single person that, but also know there are people who may burst into tears at the fact that you mentioned that they were single. So knowing who you're talking to. By the way, it's really dark here.
Yeah.
A storm is rolling in. It's almost like the piano pads just started playing behind me. It's getting very dramatic.
I was wondering, I'm like, it went from sunny to just dark.
I know.
It's really dark. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but if I put this light on above me,
you
can't see my face at all.
Yeah,
so
no, this is
sorry,
great.
guys.
Yeah.
I lit a candle. I lit a candle next to me.
Solidarity. Solidarity.
Kellen.
Turn your lights out.
I would also say, this is just, I don't know what question you ask, but something that I've really appreciated about my married friends, ministry friends is, so think about your life milestones and think about all the milestones we celebrate for kids and teenagers. And then the milestones we celebrate as adults are typically if somebody chooses to get baptized as an adult, or if they choose to, once they graduate college, what's the milestone after that? Think about it. It's marriage, it's baby shower,
it's kid related. Yeah.
And so I would say the one of the best things you can do as a ministry leader who's married, who has friends that are single, is celebrate milestones in their life with them. Like, I've gone to so many people's wedding showers, baby showers, bought them gifts, and you know what I mean? And I don't mind. I love it. I love celebrating my friends and what they want in their life. But, you know, the fact that I bought a house for the first time last year on my own, and I saved for 15 years to do that. Like, that was a big deal for me, you know? Or, you know, my sister, who is a year older than me, who's also single, when she got a puppy, I threw her a puppy shower, which was hilarious because I'm not an animal person at all. And here I am, like, buying like doggy straws or whatever I'm doing.
Amazing.
But that was a milestone for her. That was a big deal.
Right.
Or, like, when somebody launches a new business or achieves a goal, like, if you just like get to know them enough and get comfortable enough, like, what are they excited about and passionate about, and be excited with them, that is the most life-giving thing you can do for the single people in your life. And please do it. Like, can we celebrate single people in a way that acknowledges what they're bringing to the kingdom and who God's created them to be and what doors he's opened for them, rather than just waiting for the day to get married and then celebrating them. Birthdays, they're already in the schedule.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That's a really good word.
So good.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's so true. And even one thought, this has nothing to do really what you were saying, but it kind of sparked when you said like celebrating. If you're single and you're listening to this, I want to encourage you to give permissions to selective people who speak into your life. I have some friends. I have one friend. I have a lot of friends, but my one friend, John, has been my number one support and root. Like, he roots for me for finding, through my 20s, for finding, you know, the right person for me. And he was always there. He's married. He has kids. Love him to death. We hang out. We do tons of stuff together. But as you were talking, Ashley, I was trying to think like how people celebrate me or celebrated me. And I allowed John to consistently talk about marriage with me and pray with me and support. And we would go get drinks, coffee, of course. We would go, of course, and we would go out and talk about this stuff. But as you were talking, I realized he was my number one go-to. I didn't talk about all of this marriage stuff with everyone. I didn't give everyone permission to speak into my life. And I feel like sometimes we allow that, and that adds pressure, and it adds kind of a pushiness towards it. And I feel like I wasn't pushed hard because not everyone was like, well, Kellen, you got to get, they said it, but you can like ignore some of that stuff. But I would say if you're single, find a person who can still fan the flames if that's something that you want and something you want. But I think that would help control the narrative in your mind of stepping stones, of just a season, of whatnot. So I don't know where that came from, but it was just, you were saying stuff and that came to thought.
That's helpful. That's good.
I think that's so
really
good, Kellen. And, you know, like you said, you know, you have chosen to be single until you are ready to settle down. I also have chosen to be single right now. And it's weird to say this because it sounds like prideful, but it's like, I could be married if I wanted to be married.
Yeah, you're awesome. You totally could be married.
She could.
Actually, that is not prideful at all.
But it is weird to say. It's like, I'm not trying to be like, I can't get a guy. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I do have friends that, just like Kellen was saying, in my life, who I still talk about, like, being single is so lonely sometimes. Like, I'm alone for holidays, and I have amazing friends who are like, come celebrate with us. I'm like, I don't really want to celebrate with your family, sorry. But like, I think that there are like incredibly lonely times, and it is this thing you're trying to figure out. It's like, I'm not against marriage, and I'm not even against ever getting married. It's just not what I like want right now. I'm actually really good at being single, but I have people in my life who are constantly asking, like, where are you on that? Like, how are you feeling about it? What's bothered you lately about it? Like, in being lonely, especially like in this quarantine, I've had amazing friends checking on me. I live by myself. I've been in my house by myself for 9 weeks, you know? And so which sounds awful, but I feel way worse for those with small children.
Same.
When they can't wipe their butt or tie it, like whatever, I can't handle it. So, but I love, Kellen, what you said is have safe people who talk to you about it in a way that they feel comfortable and you feel comfortable, so they can ask you the hard questions, or they're going to celebrate if you're like, you know what, I changed my mind. I think I'm gonna marry this person.
Yeah.
And advice to single people listening, you know, in my 20s, I feel like I went to all my friends' weddings, and in a way it's easy to feel like you're behind. But in my 30s, I've walked through a lot of their divorces, and it's interesting. Just we're all on a different journey and it looks different. And my advice is don't settle, and focus your eyes on becoming who God's created you to be and what he's prepared for you to do. And as you are sprinting towards that goal, and you don't have to slow down, change direction, or turn around, and somebody runs next to you, like Kellen and Katie are such a good example of that. Yeah. Both of them were chasing after what God had prepared for them. And then it's like, all of a sudden they realize they're running next to each other. And they're like, how you doing? You know? Like, that's awesome. Like, don't you want to be with someone where you don't have to slow down, turn around, or change directions, and who's literally cheering you on as you're running? Yeah. Like, that's the marriage that reflects who God is, right? I'm on a soapbox again, guys.
And no, that's
good. So I know, it's so good. I know.
Just rolled in as I was saying that.
Yeah, the light is gone. There's no more light.
There's no
light, guys.
That is crazy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You're speaking to me, and you're giving me perspective on just where we're at. And it's very true. If those of you guys listening, Katie just turned 30, so she's turning 31 whenever her birthday is, the end of this year. I know when it is. I'm not going to say it, but I know when it is. But we both ran the 20s following God, trusting God. And so like Ashley was saying, when we found each other, I didn't have to break on my quirkiness. I don't feel insecure around her. And I was playing guitar with her arm the other day, and she's like, "You're weird," and smiled at me. And I'm like, "You know what? I am weird." And if I was 21, I would have been like, "Oh, what am I doing? I'm messing up." You know, the fact that we're able to just be ourselves in ministry together, it's encouraging. And I don't want people to hear this like, "Oh, one day for me." Just saying, if you trust God, and it comes back to allow God to be trusted, give him space to do his thing, and not always. It's like if you have a kid and you're telling your kid, "Hey, we're going to go to Disneyland." I'm just going to use that example because it's right down the street from me. We're going to Disneyland. But your kid, every second of every day, is on your leg. When are we going? When are we going? When are we going?
Yep.
You're not really giving that space. Like, just trust your parent. You're going to go. You're going to go. It's going to happen if that's somewhere you want to go. Mm-hmm. If it's not, all good. If you're listening to this, you're like, dang, I love being single. Bump being with somebody. Like, do you, boo? Do you, if that's what you want to do. Right. Once again, I'm an old man already. I'll just start rambling about stuff. You're like, what's he talking about? I don't know. We'll talk. So.
I'm curious, Cindy and Gina.
Yeah.
I'm curious as people who are married and a different generation than Kellen and I. I'm curious.
Barely a different.
Some of your barely. But I'm curious, like, what are your takeaways from this, or what was interesting to you, or what questions do you have, or how did it challenge you?
Yeah, I think the first thing for me, I'm sitting here going, I probably need to apologize to you, Ashley, so many times, just because I've probably said stupid things, and I just want to be super sensitive. The other thing that I'm thinking is, as both of you are talking about just this last part of our conversation, I freely tell people this, this is my second marriage, and that was not my desire. But I am from a generation that grew up going, especially for me, I grew up with great parents, but the next step for me was after graduation is you're just going to get married.
Right.
And I wish that I would have had people speaking into my life. I had good voices speaking into my life, but not Christian, not people telling me to pursue who I am and who God says I am. I wish I would have had people in my life. And this is why we do what we do, right?
Yeah.
Because we know the power of influence and how important other voices speaking into kids and students is. I wish that I would have had people telling me, you know what, figure out who you are, figure out who God says you are, figure out all the things that he's built into you and all the things that he wants to do through you. Because I can guarantee you that if I would have had that, I would not be in a second marriage. Now, I'll say all that, and I will say, I am so thankful for my husband.
He's awesome.
He's
John.
amazing. And that's going to bring tears to my eyes because, right, if I hadn't have had that first part of my adult life, I would never have met John and have the incredible marriage that we have. 20 years this year, and I'm going to scream that, right? So we were told when we got married, you're going to be a statistic because second marriages are hard. And we're like, we feel like this is our first marriage, really, because we had lived life and we knew who we were. And so all that to say, if I just want to be so much more sensitive. Ashley, you make me better being your friend because you just make me think in different ways and it gets me out of my boomer head. I'm a super young boomer, but I am a boomer. And I want to be better too because I love part of what I love doing as a leader, and Ashley and Gina, you and I have talked about this a lot, is I love bringing up young leaders and I love seeing them fly. I don't have to be the fuel, but I love seeing them fly. And so if I can be better because of this conversation.
Yeah.
Man.
Cindy, do you remember our conversation that we had?
At the Orange offices?
At the Orange offices.
Okay.
I want to encourage you. That was our first, or not first, but I think we had chatted before, but that was our first like deep conversation. And I felt comfortable with you to share what I was thinking about my now fiance.
Yeah.
When then I was still scared to ask her on a date, for crying out loud. So I just want to encourage you, all of what you're doing here. I know you get to spend a lot more time with Ashley, which I think is wonderful and awesome, but you are making a difference in that one conversation. I remember the encouragement you gave me to be the man, single young man, to be, what was I saying? Yeah, to be the man that I need to be for this awesome lady. So I just want to say thank you.
I was going to say, let me jump in before Gino, you go. I was going to say, Cindy, I want to piggyback off that and say, to first tell you that what you said about how you feel about me, the feeling is totally mutual. Like, I'm so grateful for our friendship. And I don't at all feel like you owe me an apology for anything. Like, in fact, I love our friendship because it's so safe for if you say something or if I say something that offends one or the other, I'll be like, well, actually, I don't think about it that way. And I've literally brought that up multiple times with you, and your posture is amazing. You're like, I haven't thought about that before. And it's taught me a ton about how to respond to things when people tell me things. And I'm like, I do not think like that at all. I never had that thought before. And so there's no apology needed. I'm just grateful for our friendship.
Well, yeah, thanks. Me too. I there's so much I could say and I don't need to. I'm just going to sit in that and thank you, both of you, because I love hanging out with you guys.
Yeah.
Gino, we want to hear from you.
Okay. Then I get to jump on the Cindy Fiala bandwagon.
Oh, come on.
Because I am
that's not what this is
single.
about. Look, I can't even look. I'm just going to take him out.
No. No, but I agree 100%. I mean, Ashley's right. Cindy, you lead the way towards not just listening well, but learning. And man, if there's anything that I would love to be in my epitaph, you know, when there's going to come a day when people show up at my funeral, and when that celebration happens, the number one thing I would want spoken of me is that she just never stopped learning, you know. And Cindy, you paved the way for that, you know. And so I'm also personally incredibly grateful for your friendship. So there we go. Now that that's out of the way.
I'm grateful for all y'all. Look at my Southern language right there.
All y'all. Ashley, I'm grateful that you asked that question. I go back to, you know, what the question that Reggie Joyner has been asking lately. What have you changed your mind about? And this conversation has changed my mind about some things. One, it stung to hear, and my heart broke a little bit to hear that one of the natural biases that we can have is to assume that marriage is a milestone in a person's life, that if they do not walk through that milestone, then they are inherently less mature, you know, less successful, whatever term you want to use. And that, I heard that and I thought, oh, I hate that. I can see how that's true. I hate that. Yeah. Where have I changed my mind? Celebrating milestones in the life of my single friends, you know, never occurred to me that the milestones after college, you know, or after maybe getting your first job relate so closely to building a family, you know, that something as beautiful as buying your first home, something as beautiful as getting a puppy, you know, what those are moments that you can celebrate, right? And so how have I changed my mind after this conversation? I'm watching for those opportunities because, you know, I want to celebrate milestones in the life of my single friends that is not related to building a family, you know, but definitely celebrates who they are and what they are doing, you know, how God is using them to build the kingdom, you know, so I'm grateful for that word. That's good.
That's so good. And I promise the more you do that, the more your single leaders will want to follow you.
Yeah, that's good.
It's true.
Really good.
So good.
Okay.
I feel like we could go on for a long time, but we need to break this one in half. Maybe we'll continue it again because it's a good conversation. And I think it's a super important conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, yeah.
Saying
for
yes.
having us.
Thank you.
So are you ready for the fun part of this now?
Oh, yeah.
Because
You mean that wasn't the fun part?
That was the fun part.
I mean, that was fun. But this is the lightning round.
Yeah.
And so I'll start today, Gina. Okay, so you can be ready with
I'm
the
nervous.
next one. Yeah, you should be.
Oh, they're easy.
Oh, they're easy. Yeah, they're not. So here's the first question, lightning round. Kellen, we'll have you go first. What was the last thing you binge watched on Netflix or whatever?
The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary on ESPN. I watched the final 2 ones last night. So that was the last thing.
Is that good?
It is incredible. Now, I grew up, I was born in 87, so I didn't remember a lot of the details of Michael Jordan and why and how he changed the world. A perspective of sports, especially basketball. Incredible. It's really good.
I don't get ESPN, but my sister recorded it for me, so I'm dying to get over there.
It's so good. It's so good.
Kellen, I went through a phase in my life where I would only wear Bulls clothes or Bulls colors.
Really?
Really?
You're going to love it.
What phase was that?
I mean,
what phase was that?
Elementary school. Elementary school.
All through elementary.
No, there were female athletes were second-class citizens when I was growing up.
All
so I looked up to all male athletes.
No kidding.
Awesome.
Okay,
Ash. Ashley and I've watched a lot of stuff together, but what's the last thing that you binge watched?
This season of Songland.
Oh yeah, really?
I just watched it for the first time. It's so good.
So good. I
need
have
to add
no
that to my
musical
list.
talent except listening to it. Like
That's
none.
awesome.
And so the whole way a song is written and how you make it for an artist, I'm like, know nothing about this. Teach me all the things. I'm like, maybe I could be a songwriter.
100%.
The hidden dreams of Ashley Bohens. That's awesome. All right. Here's the next question. You guys ready? Tell us what's on your nightstand right now. What are you reading?
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it's just a clock.
It's metaphor, it's a metaphor.
Metaphorical.
Kellen, is that your answer?
What?
What are you reading right now, Kellen?
What are you reading right now, Kellen?
Okay, so you guys want me to be very transparent and open about what I'm reading?
Yeah.
I'm reading a comic book called Superior Spider-Man.
Love it.
Here's the deal. I like reading leadership books, but in quarantine, I needed to just read something fun.
Yes, you did.
So
Man.
it's a comic book series called Superior Spider-Man, where Dr. Octopus becomes Spider-Man. It's a whole thing. That's what I'm reading.
Wow, Doc Ock becomes
Yeah,
Spider-Man?
well, his mind goes into Spider-Man's conscious, so he's actually Spider-Man in its comic book lore. So
I think I just found the next book for my 14-year-old.
it's really good.
That's amazing. Well, my book might also be for your 14. So I just started reading this week the new Hunger Games book. It's like the Songbirds
that's
and
right.
Snakes one.
And it's like a
'cause
prequel, right?
Yeah. So
Yes.
I'm on chapter 1.
Okay.
So that's what
Wow.
I'm reading
Fun.
right now.
That sounds like fun. That's on my list. I want to read that one.
That's good. Okay, so we have 2 more. Gina will take us over the finish line. What's one thing that people might not know about you that might surprise people? And it could be quirky, it could be silly, it could be whatever.
I would say that I'm an introvert.
Yeah, that totally
That
surprises
it does
me.
surprise me, but Ashley,
Gina McClain says the same thing, and I'm like,
I am.
whatever.
I need to be alone to show up with people.
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good.
Yeah. One thing that surprises everybody, I'm very boring at home.
That does surprise me.
Just when I get home, it is my fortress of solitude.
Yeah.
And I, even if you come over, I'm
Chill.
very, very chill, very boring.
Yeah.
But when I'm around big crowds of people, I become like a wind-up toy, and it's like,
Right.
go, go, go.
It's the Kellen show.
Yeah. And I can do this with my fingers.
Oh yeah,
Crease me out.
I can do that with just like partly. I can't do it that much.
So if you're watching the video of this, I'm doing weird things with my fingers.
And I'm cringing. I can't.
So
okay, Gina. Yeah.
All right, final question. Final
Yeah.
question. Here we go. Do you have a tattoo?
No.
Mm-mm.
No tattoo.
No.
When I was in middle school, my dad made me sign a contract that said I would never get a tattoo or pierce anything except my ears. And I had to sign it.
Like
for like life?
to infinitum? Or?
Yeah, I guess. I don't even know what the punishment is if I break the contract. But I still remember having to sign the contract. And what he gave me in return was I could get my ears double pierced and my cartilage pierced.
Yeah.
But I had to sign the contract first. So he leveraged it. And I still remember.
So good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll be taking you out for your first tattoo. Fine.
Yeah, no tattoos on me. Partly because my skin is a little bit darker than normal people's. Yeah. And honestly, I have dark friends, and when they have tattoos, I can't really see it. And so for me, I'm like, I don't really want one. And they scare me, but all my brothers have them but me. And I'm afraid they want to do like a brother pact and get one together. And I'm very scared and nervous. Now it's just a counseling session. And let me tell you.
I know there's a lot to that.
And Gina and I are going, do it. Do it.
I'm going to make you guys talk to my dad then.
Yeah, right. I got my first tattoo last year.
Yeah.
How many do you have?
Go Boomer.
Just one.
Oh, okay.
Just one.
What'd you get? One. Can I ask?
Yeah, it's right here, and it says disciple.
Mm.
That's it. That's all. My husband was really hesitant. He's like, babe, I know you. He knows if you get one, you're gonna want another, and you're gonna want another and another.
Does he have any?
No,
they're a little addictive.
He doesn't have any.
Yeah.
That means Gina has one.
I do, just one.
What may I ask as well?
Sure. It's just on my arm. It just says rooted. So
Why have I never seen that?
but I don't
I
go
know.
because I think whenever we're in the same
It's
room, I
winter.
almost have long sleeves on. Yeah.
Yeah, too. We go in.
Yeah. I always have
room.
long sleeves on because those
Yeah.
rooms are cold. But no, there's a I'm a Danielle Strickland fangirl, and I love her sleeve, and so
Oh,
that's
okay.
coming. That's
Ashley, let's get
That's
tattoos that say rooted disciple. We'll just merge.
I was thinking the NSYNC flame. Guys, dead serious. I was like NSYNC's biggest fan. If you haven't seen my senior in high school photo, I did like a whole tribute with all of the stuff I have of theirs. And they all got the NSYNC flame on their legs. And I was like, I should get that.
Yes, you should. Talk to your dad about that one.
We're gonna have to do a whole episode just about tattoos.
Don't invite me. I don't have much to say.
Me neither. I don't even have an idea of one. I wouldn't know.
Oh, you guys, this has been so good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Kellen, 7 days, man.
Yes.
7 days.
I wish we could all fly there and be there with you and Katie and have the best day.
Yeah.
Have the best day.
Congratulations. Have fun.
Thank you.
And Ashley, I just love you.
Love all of you very much.
Cindy, I was going to do that same thing. When you went like this, I was going to do the exact same thing, but I stopped because I'm like, I don't want to
Let's do it all at the same time. You ready? Here we go.
Ready, here we
Come
go.
on, guys. Mwah.
Why not? Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
you guys.
See
Thank
ya.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.